What happened at the Louvre in October 2025, well, it shocked everybody. It's not about you when you heard about this. I honestly thought it was misinformation. I thought it was an AI made up story. Here's what happened. The museum just opened. Visitors are already inside. It's early on a Sunday morning. And a small team arrive outside dressed as construction workers. Not exactly too creative here, right? They bring a truck with a mechanical lift. And then within minutes, they were rising up the outside of the Louvre towards the first floor window, near the Gallery d'Apollon, the room that houses France's historical crown jewels. And you couldn't make this up, right? So they cut their way in. They threatened staff with mechanical tools, that kind of thing. So no guns or anything like that.
And how long were they in for altogether?
8 minutes in total, start to finish. And then they were gone. That's an important thing to think about, actually. So they make their way out. And they escape on motorcycles carrying jewels, 88 million euros worth. Now, I'm definitely going to mispronounce this, but one piece was the crown of the Empress Eugenie. That was dropped, but the rest vanished. So arrests follow within days. This is what's really interesting about this. They weren't exactly master criminals, but bigger questions remain, absolutely. How does a group of thieves break into one of the most famous museums in the world, broad daylight, Sunday morning, get out with royal jewels before anybody can stop them? Yeah. So I can already see there are questions swimming around in your head. What feels weird to you about this, right? Yeah. So a glove and the crown was dropped.
Yeah.
Right? DNA all over the place. Fingerprints, there's hair, there's skin, all sorts of stuff literally all over the place. So I know what you're going to say now, but is this the work of master criminals?
Well, I mean, they obviously messed up because they dropped the glove and they dropped a crown, but they still got away with 88 million euros worth of equipment.
Yeah.
So I think they did pretty well. I mean, obviously we have to see how this story develops to see whether they got away with it or not.
Yeah.
But I don't think they're necessarily that sloppy. And it is pretty audacious to do it in broad daylight.
Yeah.
I get that. But then it's almost like hiding in plain sight, isn't it? Because you'd be more suspicious. You'd have more attention put on you if you tried to do the same thing, if you dressed up as a crew of workmen in the middle of the night.
All right. Well, let me walk you through the exact details of it, right? Okay. So let's build this picture outwards together, right? Sunday morning. Let's go through it again. Try and pick holes in this with me, okay?
Sure.
So just opened, all right? So it's early in the morning. Tourists beginning to move through the galleries. So outside, truck pulls up. So there's nothing weird about that. There's a couple of things I want to mention to you about that, actually. So 4 men dressed as construction workers, they arrive outside in this truck. So they deploy a mechanical lift attached to the vehicle and raise themselves to a first floor window. So sugar at this point, is it reasonable to say that alarm bells should have been ringing for anybody watching? And also, possibly, an alarm should have been ringing at the Louvre. Is that reasonable?
I mean, it's not. Is it unfeasible to think that workmen will come and work on a building? I mean, I'm sure they need reconstruction. So again, it's all about the amount of confidence that they have in pulling it off. But also, I suppose the security guards would need to check their credentials, and they must have some sort of system to know they're coming.
But surely, right? So you're one of the security personnel in the Louvre.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, I keep hesitating when I'm saying Louvre, by the way. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Louvre. Nice. There you are. All right. But there's got to be CCTV, doesn't there? Someone's definitely going to be coming out to at least ask these guys questions. What's going on? Okay.
I do wonder whether there's an element of everybody talking about the security team thinking that somebody else is dealing with it.
Listen, that's the genius of all of these things. That hiding in plain sight. When I was doing a lot of undercover work, something that we realized very quickly is that when you're undercover, you are very deliberately overt, because the more overt you are, the less likely it seems that you might be working undercover.
Yeah.
And I'd say that same mentality, that same principle is probably what they used.
Yeah.
If we go in here, bold, brazen, dressed as construction workers, then people might think it's a bit wonky, it's a bit funny, it's a bit weird, but it's so obvious. Surely they couldn't be criminals after a crown jewel.
Yeah, I've got this vague memory of years ago watching these random YouTube clips where you have these pranksters that go into like official buildings. I think they actually did like concerts, and they definitely did museums as well, to see if they could get in as construction.
Right. Yeah.
And the vast majority of the times, nobody asked them for their ID or credentials, because again, they just assume if you look like a construction worker, then you usually are.
So the target is the Galerie d'Apollon, right? So inside that gallery sits the French crown jewels. You would think this is Fort Knox type territory. Please remember to ask me about that part of it, by the way, because there's a few interesting parts there. So the thieves cut through the window, enter the gallery, threaten the guards with power tools.
Yeah.
Display cabinets are smashed. There's not a lot of finesse going on here. It's not Thomas Crown Affair stuff where they're cutting through with diamonds to get at diamonds.
Yeah.
So jewels and historic pieces are taken, and from entry to escape, 8 minutes in total, which is kind of remarkable. So that part of it makes me think maybe they were half decent at this.
I've got a question.
Go on.
Were there any actual physical security barriers? So you could smash the glass and physically grab them and nothing, there's no barriers or anything?
To the best of my knowledge, and I did actually look into that, the answer is no.
Okay.
There were velvet ropes around it. And obviously, not exactly high security.
So to me, that's a bigger gap in the system than the security guards, personally.
Yeah, it's interesting, all right. So I think an alarm went off as soon as they were taken, but still, they must have been in there for at least 6 minutes, factoring in the time it took to get in and get out. Yeah. Motorbikes are waiting downstairs. During the escape, the crown of Empress Eugenie is dropped and later recovered, but the rest disappears. Let's talk about the disappearance part in just a little bit. But what they take is mind-blowing. That's why it sounded more like the plot of a movie, didn't it?
Yeah.
A necklace of diamonds and emeralds that Napoleon, the man himself, gave to his wife, Mary Louise. A pearl and diamond tiara, as I said, belonging to Empress Eugenie. Jewels once worn by 2 19th century queens. So there's 8 pieces in all. But in their rush, they leave things behind. All right. So this is the part that contrasts with the idea that they were master criminals. A motorcycle helmet. Who's going to drop a motorcycle helmet?
Yeah.
A glove, right? Other items carrying their DNA. And strangely, they walk past the Regent Diamond, one of the most valuable stones in the world, right? So that doesn't quite add up. They don't touch that.
And do you think that was intentional? I presume they would have done their research and their background work, right?
Yeah.
So they must know that it's worth a lot of money. So is that maybe higher risk to them?
So there's sort of 2 schools of thought on this, isn't there? Insofar as that they were so methodical that they assessed the potential risks of going after the Regent Diamond and said no. Or they weren't master criminals. They were hired by someone else, hired goons just to go in, smash the cabinets, to make away with all of this stuff. And really, they barely knew what they were nicking. So let's piece that together. Motorcycle helmet. As I said, master criminal is not dropping a motorcycle helmet. You really aren't. Fingerprints. Gloves were dropped. Hairs all over the place. Skin all over the place. So it suggests to me that perhaps this was the work of somebody else who'd done all the work but didn't want to get their hands dirty and kept people in the dark until possibly the morning or night before and said, look, this is the job. You've been paid. Go and do it. Or there might be consequences for you and your family. Then let's briefly talk about the mentality. You might know a bit more about this than me.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the mentality of someone who takes a risk like that. So I sometimes joke, money's always tight and hard and the world is a difficult place, right? As mortgages and kids and cars and stuff. So we joke sometimes over a pint. One big job.
Yeah.
We did one big job. What would the one big job be?
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I wouldn't be going after the French crown jewels. The risk factor involved in something like that is colossal. So in your experience, what's the psychology of a criminal who says, yeah, I'll have a crack at that?
Yeah. So before I answer that, I would say that I would actually have a different perspective of that.
Oh, go on.
If I was a professional burglar, I think I would rather do one high-risk job that will set me up for life than multiple little jobs with low risk.
Really?
Because I think over time, your chance of getting caught is just higher if you burgle like houses or warehouses, for example. But if you get away with it, and we'll come to that later, if you did, 88 million, for 4 people, I'm sure they have other people they have to kick it up to and other people that were involved and helped organize. But we're talking about possibly tens of millions each.
Yeah.
For 8 minutes work. And
It's a good return that, isn't it?
It's an amazing return in your investment. And if they knew that security was that slack, then I think it's worth doing. But to answer your question, I think in terms of the motivations, I mean, obviously it goes without saying that the most clear motivation is financial. So there would have been a high level of planning, no doubt, but for the amount of time you put in altogether, the return is just amazing. I mean, a lot of people would say that there might be an element of thrill. I think that for some hardened criminals who are very, very experienced, who have had a lifetime or a really long history of doing lots of different burglaries,
career criminals,
they might get a little thrill from it, and they might want to up the ante to get more of an adrenaline rush. But I think this is such a rare occurrence. So what I'm trying to say is I don't think they're going around doing this kind of heist frequently. Okay. So I think it's more financial, I think, and also status within the criminal underworld. Because obviously you can't tell everybody, but you can tell a select few of your peers what you've done. And I just think the kudos of pulling something off like that would ring heavy in the underworld. Yeah,
your street credibility would be pretty sound after something like that. Yeah.
And the other thing that I think is quite unique about this particular type of crime is that it's almost romanticized in popular culture.
Yes.
Because you mentioned Thomas Crown Affair, right?
Yeah.
I think, did you say Ocean's 11? I think you mentioned that as well.
No, but I was thinking it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are these films where it's almost like a modern day Robin Hood.
Yes.
So they are criminals and they cause damage, but it's almost seen as a very cool crime. And I think that part of that is because...
It's such a strange thing to say.
Yeah.
Cool crime.
Yeah. But I think
you're totally right.
And I think part of that is movie culture, as we said. And also because if you look at these films, if you need a baddie, say if you need a criminal protagonist or an anti-hero, somebody that's, deep down a decent person, but they've done something wrong for one of these movies, for example, there's not that many crimes that you can really select. Because you can't select like a violent offender or a scammer because the public doesn't like that. So it's almost like there's only a couple of tropes where you can have a cool criminal. One of them is like a high stakes burglar. There might be something like somebody who stands up to bullies that, who protects a vulnerable individual. Apart from that, there's not really that many kind of tropes. And also I think in these cases, it's felt that the target isn't an individual, but it's like a faceless authority like your insurance company or the government. And I think it's seen as being so unbelievably daring that there's a kudos in some just having the balls to go.
Yeah, I mean, there are documentaries and films as we speak being made about this. And I was genuinely looking forward to having a chat to you about this today and to ask you, why don't I hate these guys? Like, you just answered it.
Yeah.
But why, when I think about them, holding up the security guards, you think, would have been surprised and shocked and scared, and there will obviously be resulting trauma from those moments with the security guards. I wasn't thinking about that. Yeah. Instead, I was thinking, power tools. They're nice guys. They didn't bring in guns. They didn't bring in knives. They didn't bring in samurai swords.
They didn't physically hurt anybody.
They didn't physically hurt anyone. They brought in power tools. They're not bad guys.
So I think there's probably some people, some members of society that actually want them or would wish for them to get away with it. Just kind of stick one up to the authorities or the man or the government.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? So I do want to talk to you about security in the Louvre, obviously, but the response is immediate, right? The French police launch a major investigation involving more than 100 officers. This is international egg in your face, so they move fast, right?
Yeah.
So the stolen jewels are entered into international art databases. Within 6 days, the first two suspects are in custody. One is arrested at Charles de Gaulle Airport 40 minutes before he gets on the plane to Algeria. That's going to be a good part of the movie. A bit of risk and jeopardy. The other is picked up nearby. Now, both are already known to police for burglary offences, which again makes me think these are low-level criminals. More arrests follow. In the weeks after the robbery, some suspects are released, others are charged with organised gang theft.
And can I just ask, these arrests are all made because of the DNA evidence that's left behind?
Yeah.
So had they not made that mistake of dropping the glove and the bike helmet, then they probably would have got away with it.
Yeah. Okay. So based on my understanding of it is forensic and digital tracking. Yeah, exactly. So I think in these circumstances, friends of mine that are police, and I was asking them about this, generally what happens is how the drag net goes out immediately after something like this, right? Yeah. Especially if there's 100 officers on the case. Well, the forensics are massively helpful, aren't they? So I think a couple of the guys here very possibly could have already been in their database.
Yeah.
So they're going to get them straight away. But then, and my time working undercover as well, and, you know, infiltrating criminal gangs, there is a sort of whisper thread within the criminal world that is difficult to get away from.
Yeah.
There's no way at all that someone didn't say over a beer or a glass of wine somewhere in a bar, I think this guy's involved, or he was hired to do this.
Yeah.
So I think the web is always interconnected when it comes to the criminal underworld.
And plus, if you're taking such unique one-off items, then at some point you're going to have to try and sell them.
Yes.
It's impossible to not have at least to not release some of the news to the criminal underworld.
Yeah, no, absolutely. To piece together the structure of the group, right? So they're thinking to themselves, how does this work? But recovering, and here's the tricky part, recovering stolen cultural objects is often far harder than identifying the thieves. They've done well there, but DNA becomes the key. So one suspect identified from DNA left at the crime scene. We mentioned the helmet, didn't we?
Yeah.
Another from the helmet dropped at the scene. So that's two. The Paris prosecutor, Laure Bacot, I think, I'll get that right, confirms the DNA links publicly. And then cameras pick up two of the suspects hours later, and this is after the heist, in an underground car park in a suburb north of Paris. All right. So that footage then becomes the last confirmed sighting of the jewels. In total, 5 people are formally charged. This is reasonably soon after the heist itself.
Yeah.
9 others are held and later released. And all 4 of the men believed to have carried out the robbery are in custody as we speak. But here's the kicker. Here's the thing, and you might just be about to ask about this. The jewels themselves are still missing.
Yeah. And of those 4, are all 4 on the police DNA database? So they're all previous criminals?
Don't know that, actually. We can find that out. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. So let's talk about security at the Louvre. So there had been a security audit done of the Louvre, of the building, in the time leading up to the heist. The specific area of the museum where these jewels were kept, it was flagged, it was earmarked in the audit.
Yeah.
It said, this is not sufficient. CCTV within that area, within the museum, wasn't working properly. There was only 1 camera, is my understanding. And I've rummaged through all the information, the contrasting police reports, etc., and news reports. So only 1 camera loosely pointed in that particular area. And also the balcony where they entered, the alarm system there wasn't working properly. So you'd wonder, with the value of the jewels that are in there, how was something like that possible? So apparently it comes down to a thing called audit fatigue, and it is perception. And it makes me think it might be worth having a crack at Fort Knox if me and you want to do one job together. And the reason for this is that the perception of the Louvre is such that it is a fortress. It is impenetrable. Nobody is getting in there. How could they? There's too much wonderful and pricey and valuable stuff in there. But that perception apparently isn't held just by those outside, but it's held by those inside. And as the years go on, this is, psychological, so I'm sure you'll be interested in this and you might have something to add to it. But as the years go on, and as no one attempts these kinds of heists, that fatigue builds and builds to the point that it can result in lapse, security, a lazy approach, presumptive idea that no one's even going to try, and therefore things fall to pieces. Does that make sense to you?
Well, this is speculation, but I do wonder whether any of the people involved in the burglary might have known about that.
Me too.
Because, obviously they've done their research, but it just seems like such a ballsy thing to do.
Yeah.
And obviously the staff there the security staff were massively overconfident, weren't they?
Yes. I have a bit of a theory about this.
Okay.
All right. This is based around my experience. So let me put a bit of context into this.
Sure.
So in the time, how long have I been doing this? More than 25 years. And the time that I've been sort of dealing with criminals, and you've been dealing with criminals as well, one thing has always stood out for me. There is a systemic lack of organization. When you think of the movie Criminals and the gangs, and there's a hierarchy and there's a scaffold and there's a genius that sits at the top who strokes a cat in a beautiful leather chair. That just isn't a reality. These gangs are fractured, they're disorganized. There might be someone who leads it, but there's always someone looking to sort of topple them.
And there's often like infighting between factions.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So it's
stable.
Exactly. So there's very little organization. Yeah. And based on conversations I've had with police in Ireland, the UK, Interpol over the years, after I've done interviews with them, I've always made a point of, as soon as the cameras have stopped rolling, I've asked them this question: organized are they really? And they always scoff. They always laugh. They always say, oh, they're such a mess. Sometimes there's a little bit of organization, but then as soon as that happens, someone's killed off or moves on or gets arrested, and then it's absolute chaos again. So here's my theory. Okay. Are you ready? All right. So I think there was a reasonably organized criminal cell that operated in France and also internationally behind this. I think they somehow, now I'm not of course accusing security personnel within the Louvre of leaking this information. Remember, hackers can get this information reasonably easy. I think somebody hacked the security system, saw the gaps, but thought to themselves, despite what you said earlier, that you'd have a crack, you'd have a go because it's a big payoff.
Yeah.
I think whoever these people are thought, too high risk. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a group of guys who are criminals. They've done this kind of work before. I'm going to tell them how to do it. And I'm also going to make absolutely sure that there are consequences for them if they refuse to do it. So I think the guys that went in there possibly were under duress. I don't think they were master criminals. I don't think they were vastly experienced. I don't even think they knew they were doing the Louvre. I really don't think so. I really don't think so. I think maybe the morning before, and I think that's why they dropped helmets. That's why they left hair. That's why there's skin all over the place. And that's why they're caught at airports and they're in the DNA database.
What makes you think they're under duress there?
Because it's a crazy thing to do. It's absolutely crazy. And I think possibly what happened was that word spread, big job going on. And that's genuinely how it happens in the criminal underworld. A pulse will go out, information will be spread through this sort of interconnected sort of whisper thread. There's a big job going. But you don't get all the details of the jobs, is what I've learned over the years from having these types of conversations. Very often it's revealed in the last minute. But by then, they know who you are. They know who your family is. They know where your mum and dad live, where your wife lives, where your kids live. And you're in now. They tell you the details of the job. You can't turn around and say no. So I personally think that whoever it is that hired these men to do it had a boot on their neck. That's why they were all arrested so quickly. It was a little bit too easy for the police, but the head of the snake disappeared and the jewels gone. What do you think? Does that make sense to you, or is it nonsense?
I mean, it makes sense. Yeah. I'm not sure that I necessarily agree.
Okay, go on.
In that I think there are other explanations. So I think it could be that they are a relatively professional outfit, but they just panicked at the time. Because remember, this is very different from any other crime they would have done.
Yeah.
Like, they've had lots of different similar experiences.
Yeah.
If they are professional burglars, they would have done it in such a smaller scale and such a lower level of risk that I think they might have just shat themselves and dropped the ball when it happened.
And the helmet.
But I do think, that they must have had some inside information. I don't think they could have known all the security weaknesses just through surveillance. Again, I'm not, just like you said, because I don't want to get cancelled, but I'm not implicating the inside staff of the Louvre. I mean, that's a possibility, but I do wonder whether that audit was somehow hacked, like you suggested, if they got that information.
So in the Apollon Gallery, the cameras were not positioned, I repeat, were not positioned in a way that properly monitored the display area. I mean, that feels bananas.
Yeah.
So the fallout is really severe afterwards. The museums Director offers her resignation on the day of the heist. That is later accepted. The culture minister is involved. But the robbery becomes much more than a crime story. It becomes a national embarrassment, which of course you can understand.
Yeah.
International egg on their face. So in December 2025, the French Senate publishes the results of its own inquiry, right? And what it finds is damning, to say the least. So here's the thing, right? Only one of the 2 cameras covering the entry point was working on the day of the robbery. So 50% of the cameras weren't working.
Yeah.
Security staff didn't have enough screens to monitor every feed in real time. So they were flicking between the screens.
So I have to ask, like, I don't think you'll know the answer to this.
Go on.
But they must have known, right?
That's what makes sense to me.
It's too much.
That's what makes sense
coincidence
to me. Yeah.
that they wouldn't have known.
Yeah.
That there's such big labs.
Yeah.
How could they have known? You can't just tell that from staking out a joint by being a member of the public.
I mean, let's just think about it logically. And I think sometimes, all of the armchair investigators across the world, of which I am one, sometimes they think to themselves, this is way too complicated. I could never do this. I'd have no idea. Well, there's no university that trains you how to break into the Louvre and steal jewels. You learn this kind of thing for yourself. So logically, if you didn't have the information at hand, you'd probably break in, as in if there wasn't some form of information either leaked or hacked, right?
Yeah.
Well, you'd break in at nighttime, wouldn't you? You take your chances at nighttime. But I agree. I think they must have known something if they're so overtly, so absolutely scaldingly, brazenly going to go in daylight, Sunday morning. They're all going to wear luminous gear. Remember that. They're construction workers. They're wearing luminous hats. They're literally standing out like sore thumbs. They jump onto this balcony and in they go. It all makes sense, doesn't it?
So you don't think that any of either the gang themselves or whoever they're directly working for is like a high society art appreciator? Do you think this is only in the criminal underworld?
Very interesting. So the profile of the men that were arrested and are in custody as we speak would not be in keeping with that. Let me go through, though, the other security issues. When the alarm finally sounded, police were sent to the wrong part of the building. So they went to the completely wrong part of the building first.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Is that just an unlucky event, or is that
I think
somehow orchestrated?
Do you know, I actually don't know the answer to that. So the Senate inquiry concludes the thieves got away with roughly 30 seconds to spare. The police arrived 30 seconds after, and the head of the police looking after this put it very simply. He said, give or take 30 seconds, guards or police could have stopped them. So it was 30 seconds in the difference. And the inquiry also revealed something else quite interesting, that the balcony the thieves used to get in had been flagged as a weak point in earlier audits. Nothing was done about it. So February 2026, not so long ago, director of the Louvre resigns. President Macron accepts the resignation, and the Apollon Gallery remains closed.
The more you talk about this, the more convinced I am that there was inside information.
Yeah.
This 30 seconds just seems almost meticulously planned.
Yeah.
Chosen that specific balcony.
Yeah.
It really does feel like they've either hacked or leaked your security information.
Yes. There's a really interesting phenomenon going on here as well, that the men in custody are being accused by the French media of weaponizing their silence.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is that none of them are saying a word. None of them are,
And presumably there's a consequence to that. They would have had a longer prison sentence, or they would have been offered some leniency.
Yeah. Oh, of course. Well, you would think so. I mean, there's huge pressure on the French judiciary to absolutely hammer these guys to make sure that they never see the light of day again. But they would have to dangle that carrot, wouldn't they? Surely, tell me where the jewels are and we will reduce your sentences.
I think what comes to my mind is that if this had happened in another country, they probably would have been like literally physically tortured.
Oh, yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah. No, absolutely.
Cool. The more I hear about this case, the more I'm convinced that there is somebody else behind the scenes that's not part of these 4 original burglars, because from what I understand, they're petty criminals, but they don't have any known ties to organized crime. So I don't think they'd have the channels to get rid of this kind of loot. And also because they come from a particular area, it's like a poorer area on the north side of Paris called Saint-Denis.
Yeah.
And again, I just don't see them rubbing shoulders with high value art connectors.
No.
I think there's something going on which we might not find out about until the actual trial itself.
Yeah. What was done afterwards with what was taken? So 88 million euros taken.
Yeah.
Obviously enough, this doesn't include the crown that was dropped, and they walked straight past the Regent Diamond, right? So as we were discussing, there's the possibility that the gold was melted down, jewels and gems, recut, different weights, recirculated, laundered back into the system, back into the market. But is there, I don't want to disregard the idea that something might have been preserved, that something was sold on. What do you reckon?
So I think you and I might differ slightly in our opinions about this. I just think that if they were going to melt down the gold and recut the jewels, why would you take that level of risk? Because if you got caught, then you're spending a significant amount of time, decades in prison afterwards, compared to just going down to a local jeweler shop where you can also get diamonds.
I hear you.
You can also get gold. It's much, much lower profile, much lower risk. So either they're intentionally taking that risk just for the thrill, which is possible, but not particularly sensible.
Seems unlikely,
or that there is some sort of high value art collector who is he literally is so rich that they don't ever want to sell on these pieces of art. They just want to keep them for them.
Under lock and key, in some fortified basement or bunker,
which
hundreds of feet under.
In itself is kind of crazy, because how narcissistic must you be to want to own this stolen piece of work that you can't share with the world?
It's real power, that though, wouldn't it be? As in, it belongs to France, but now it belongs to me, and no one knows it's there. So there is definitely an idea that that's possible. I think it further supports the idea that there is a fracture in the group, really organized head of the snake, not so organized crew, and then maybe there was a private collector who commissioned a part of it. But when they realized just how vulnerable this place was, and also the extraordinary riches that were available there, maybe they thought, look, remember, the cabinets were just smashed. It might have been more of a smash and grab than we think. And that too is in keeping with all of my experience, and that it always sounds hugely organized, but generally it's not. It's just opportunists, blokes with power tools smashing windows and grabbing jewels.
I suppose to try and access their commissioned piece. Thievery. So it's just like a bonus if they can get their hands on anything.
No, totally. So let's talk about some of the men that were actually involved here, that are in custody as we speak. But there was a woman involved as well here. So sometimes the French police, the French judiciary, release the first name and initial of some of the people that are involved, right? So we don't know the full names, we don't know the full identities, but we can piece bits and pieces of this together to sort of build a wider profile of the people that are involved in this. So we have 3 half names. We have Ayad G, we have Abdullah N, and then we have Slimane, sure I'm mispronouncing that, K, who's suspected of driving a scooter. So keep those in your mind. Abdullah, reported by French media as a primary suspect, criminal record, 15 offences, including a previous 2014 jewellery store robbery. Worked as a security guard and for logistics firms like UPS. Doesn't sound like a Bond villain to me. Doesn't sound like a mastermind. What do you reckon?
That's correct, but he does have some insight into the world of security.
Yes. That's interesting. I didn't put that together, actually. That's interesting.
So he would probably have a rough idea of reaction times. Of what risks a guard's going to take in terms of their own safety to try and protect something that doesn't belong to them.
34-year-old Algerian national arrested at Charles de Gaulle. This was the guy that was caught with 40 minutes to go before his flight. He was nailed, according again to French media, because his DNA matched a scooter used in the getaway, right? So if you're extremely experienced, if you're planning this for years, are you leaving DNA in a scooter?
Yeah.
What do you reckon?
I agree.
Really?
Likely, yeah.
No, you're not. Next, 39-year-old taxi driver. Now, if you want information anywhere in the world, there are 2 places that you always go. Well, 3 places you always go first. Sex workers, taxi drivers, and pubs that open early in the morning. So it doesn't surprise me that a taxi driver is responsible here, because that whisper thread that I talked about earlier, this sort of criminal network, this web of information, taxi drivers are all over this stuff. Former delivery driver, born in the Paris suburbs. You mentioned the suburb earlier.
Yeah.
Previous convictions for robbery, and was linked to a 2014, the same 2014 robbery actually, that we mentioned that Abdullah N was involved in there.
So there is a feeling that it is a connected cell, because at least 2 of them have worked on the same crime.
Yeah, right.
More than 10 years earlier.
Yeah, same area. They have previous. Yeah, absolutely. So it's coming together, isn't it? The picture's coming together a little bit. Another 37-year-old man, believed to be the 3rd member of the core 4-person crew, allegedly arrived at the museum with a lift truck to simulate renovation work. So that was, by the way, I didn't say that. So that was the idea. If somebody approached them on the day, the plan was they were going to say renovation work.
Yeah.
And if I'm walking past there on a Sunday morning and I'm curious, because I'm nosy and I ask people things, I probably would have asked them, what are you up to, lads? Oh, renovation work. Completely plausible, isn't it? Yeah. Then there was a woman involved as well, 38-year-old woman, identified as the partner of the 37-year-old suspect, the chap with the truck that I mentioned. And she was charged because of DNA that was found in the equipment used during the break-in. Again, you're not leaving the DNA on that, are you? So, so 4-person crew. The first is the infiltrators. So 2 men forced a window, used disc cutters to smash display cases in the Apollo Gallery. 2 others remained outside. One of them managed the lift, and then the group fled on 2 scooters towards eastern Paris. So those are the backgrounds. Those are the previouses.
And was there something about one of the perpetrators being a stunt person, somebody who took risks on motorbikes?
Yeah. So that was uncorroborated by the more sort of credible news outlets in Paris.
The reason I'm bringing that up is because I said earlier that people often think that there's an element of thrill seeking in heists like this. And generally speaking, I think that's a bit over-egged by the media.
Yeah.
But I think there's a potential connection here. So if you have somebody that literally does adrenaline type activities on motorbikes, then maybe there's an element of just the absolute audacity of doing it.
Yeah.
So maybe they were thrill seeking, or this individual was thrill seeking,
and they missed them by just 30 seconds. Isn't that incredible?
Yeah,
incredible. The police then going to the wrong part of the museum again. This farcical thread. So something as well that I think plays into this idea that those men and the woman that were involved, there may have been elements of duress. They may have been elements that they weren't part of this, big, sophisticated criminal gang. Is that no one is saying anything, right? So no one is speaking up. They're all in custody. To the best of our knowledge, and believe me, the French police would be very, very quick to reveal any information that they have on the whereabouts of any of the jewels or gems or historical artifacts, because there is international egg in their face. But no one's saying anything. So there's 2 schools of thought in this, right?
Yeah.
So it's a weaponization of silence. They're saying, no, we have the power. We're just going to sit here, sit out our years in prison, and then we're going to retire to some, beautiful tropical paradise with the riches. Yeah. Or, and I think this is the more likely of the circumstances, they're being told to say a word and your whole family will die. Yeah. So I genuinely do not believe that the people that went in there, the accomplices, the infiltrators, the getaway drivers that were involved, the guy operating the lift, I think that they were hired to do this, that the plan sits in the sort of upper echelons of the criminal world. And I think they're sitting there in custody, knowing that if they do volunteering information about the sort of inside track of all of this, well, then there could be very serious consequences. So what do you think that maybe I'm looking for something?
I think it's a possibility.
Yeah.
I'm not as convinced as you are that they are under duress.
Okay.
I mean, as you'll know from your own experience of being a crime reporter, there is a criminal code, right? So they could have, especially if they know each other intimately, and we know that at least two of them have been carrying out jobs together for decades, they might have just made a pact. If we get caught, we're not going to give each other up.
Yeah.
And they agreed that in good faith going into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it could be they're just willing to take the extra years because their colleagues would have done the same.
So what point does that code crack? So you make this agreement in some sort of dusty, hidden, shadowy basement. You say, right, if we get caught, nobody say a word. But then you're in an interrogation room. Then the world's media and French Parliament are screaming for your head. They're going to be leaning very heavily on you, boots on necks. They're going to be saying, we're going to make your family's life hard. You're never going to see the light of day again. At what point you're absolutely right, what point does that criminal code crack? I think there is a fracture point for everybody. And I think they're too scared to cross the line.
I think there's a fracture point for most people. And from my experience, having worked in prisons, there's all this talk of bravado and not snitching, but people very quickly snitch on each other. For example, bringing in contraband in prison, I've seen that so many times. But if they're a very tight-knit unit, they know each other intimately, if they've grown up together, we know that at least some of them come from the same neighborhood, then maybe they're just willing to stick to it.
Yeah.
So I think we do need to make it clear that 5 people have been charged, but none of them have been found guilty yet, and they've not had their day in court.
Yes.
And I think that there's a lot that we don't know yet and probably won't know until the trial.
Yeah. I think part of what is going to make our, discussions over time interesting is this question of the what's missing question, what's still unusual, what's still weird. And in terms of a final thought, I definitely think it's the makeup, the perception of this criminal gang is borrowed from history and from movies and from what you said earlier on, this sort of Robin Hood effect. And that idea is that these types of criminal organizations are sophisticated, they are cutting edge. I really don't think that's the case here. I think this is all the hallmarks of a very sophisticated unit or cell commissioning this crime, or indeed obligating people to commit this crime. But there's fall guys here, the people that are in custody, the 5 you mentioned, who have not yet, of course, been prosecuted, and all sorts of details might come out in court. But it seems to me that that's the thing that we're going to find out later down the track, that there's someone as much as something that we don't know about this.
So my final thought is not too dissimilar to yours. I'm not necessarily convinced that it's another cell or that it's duress, but I do think there's a Mr. Big here. I think there's some connection that these individuals, these 5, they don't have to the upper echelons of high society, but I think there's a Mr. Big to have got the inside information, number 1, and number 2, to have the connections to potentially move on or sell on this art to a high profile collector.
Yeah. Do you reckon one of the items, 2 of the items, perhaps more of the items stolen here, the historical, priceless, almost, impossible to put a value on these, remarkable items and artifacts? Do you think that any of what was stolen is sitting in someone's house as we speak?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Do you?
Yeah. Maybe not in somebody's house, but it's in storage somewhere.
You think?
Yeah.
So there's a possibility that this might be found.
I think some of it might be repurposed, as you suggested, but I think that just to take such a big risk to get something high value, they would only repurpose it or destroy it as a very, very last resort. I think they would have gone in with a plan to sell it to somebody.
I think they sold one thing. I think they sold 2 things. I think whoever bought them, commissioned the crime initially, engaged the sophisticated part of the cell, and then I think they handed it off not to get their hands dirty. But I agree. I think it's very possible there is something, but also I think someone's going to have a diamond on their finger fairly soon, and it came from a museum in France.
So I look forward to the court case. Let's see what else we can find.
Indeed. Thanks so much for listening to this True Crime Dissected, and if you enjoyed the episode, make sure to follow the show and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back very soon with another case.